What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Brave and Faithful podcast. I'm your host, Raiden Denicio. Today, I'm joined by another Army veteran and another podcaster. He's the podcaster for the Morning Formation podcast. KP, what's going on, brother?
Hey, Raiden, I really appreciate you having me on your show, man. Just the same old, dealing with allergies and everything that comes with the beautiful springtime pollination.
Allergies and power outages, internet
Yes,
going out.
yes.
um, so KP, man, before we talk about the podcast, can you just share with our audience a little bit about your military background, your time in the Army?
Yeah, man. So I grew up an Army brat. My dad was drafted in 71, towards the end of the Vietnam War. And so I grew up, was born in Schofield Barracks, or just off of Schofield Barracks in Wahiawa, Hawaii. So lived that till I was 13 on the island of Oahu. And then my dad retired out of the military, and then he moved back to his home state of Ohio. So I got a little taste of the Midwest, a little taste of the island life growing up. Right after graduation, I joined the Army National Guard, enlisted, went to basic training 3 days after I got my diploma. Then I had plans to go to a local college there in Ohio called Wright State University. Was enlisted for about 4 years in the National Guard. And then I decided that I would get commissioned as an officer. So it was either OCS or it was going to be the SMP ROTC route. And I decided to go the SMP route, which stands for Simultaneous Membership Program. It's actually a really, really great program if you're going to college and you're kind of concurrently going to the national or drilling at the National Guard enlisted as well. I was able to drill and then also join the ROTC program. And then the day I got my bachelor's degree from Wright State, I commissioned into active duty Army. Got stationed back at Schofield Barracks in Hawaii 30 days after getting there as a butter bar second lieutenant. They gave me my orders to go to Iraq, and this was in 2004. So not even a year out of college, man, I was already finding myself as a platoon leader in Iraq at the time. And I ended up with a transportation platoon as my first platoon that I've ever had before, as a commissioned officer anyways. I was very fortunate that I had a little bit of enlisted time under my belt to help me get acclimated to, I guess, being in combat.
Yeah.
And then did my 1 year deployment in Mosul, Iraq, as a platoon leader, and went back to Hawaii and served as an executive officer for my company as a first lieutenant. And I got promoted to captain. Served as a staff officer as the S3 training officer in the battalion. So helped 5, 6 other companies with their training and deployment training as well. And that was all based off of the experience that I received when I was a young second lieutenant in Iraq. They saw that I had that early experience, so they wanted to use it, and they put me in the S3 training section. And end of 2007 was when I resigned my commission and got out of the Army altogether.
So you were born in Hawaii, and then you got stationed in where you were born at. Like how was that? Like,
So I'm kind of I'm a conspiracy kind of guy with that, because it was kind of strange how a lot of the soldiers in my company were from the islands, or they were from the South Pacific somewhere. Like I had a lot of local people that were from, so I almost felt like the Army was purposely putting people back in Hawaii because, sometimes when folks are from landlocked areas and then they go out into the middle of the ocean, they tend to get what's called rock fever or island fever. And they want to leave. They don't want to be there anymore because they feel like they're stuck, And so I just thought it was real strange that I had a lot of like Samoans, a lot of Micronesians, folks from Guam. I had, folks that were from the islands in my company and all around base. But that's my own, I guess, conspiracy as far as them doing that.
yeah.
Yeah, I got lucky, man. I got really fortunate, but at the same time, like I said, as soon as I landed in Honolulu, I got my orders to deploy. So kind of a good and bad thing.
Yeah. So you did your enlistment, you got out. Did you stay in Hawaii or did you move after you transitioned out of the military?
So I actually left. I was on the fence. So I almost went to join the Honolulu Police Department, but while I got back from my deployment, and I was in garrison at the time, which means, I was just there on base on island. I decided to get my master's degree. So I started working on my graduate's degree. That took me about a year and a half to do. Every time the civil service test would come up for Honolulu Police Department, like I was either taking classes or doing something. So I kind of just ditched that whole idea. And plus, the pay starting out wasn't really what I wanted. So I decided to go through a headhunter who helps senior NCOs and commissioned officers find jobs. Basically, what they do is there's several out there. What they do is they get in contact with large companies looking to hire military veterans, and they'll set up like a weekend event where like 1 to 2 days will be spent helping the veteran with the resume and helping the veteran with their overall interviewing. And so the last day that you're there, you will actually sit across the table from recruiters, and you'll I guess interview for jobs,
Okay.
for different positions. So they kind of talk to you about what the needs, what you're looking for, and then that's how they kind of link you up with who you're going to be talking to. And so for me, that's the route that I went. And after that weekend that I spent doing that, I had maybe four opportunities on the table. But by the time it was all said and done, man, like I only had one opportunity, and it was in the Midwest, working in Indianapolis for Rolls Royce, which is they do the cars, but then the specific area that I would work in would be aeronautics.
Okay.
So I found myself in Indianapolis right after I got out of the military, and started working as a departmental supervisor for the accessory gears department for the rotary wing helicopters. So for Bell Helicopter and things like that. So
For you mentioned like headhunters, right? Like people that help you out with getting hired by companies. Was that something that that was free and available, or did you have to pay for that? Because I mean, there's plenty of organizations, right? Like there's Hire Military, for example, Hire Heroes that kind of help you with getting that next job, so to say.
no, that's a great question, actually, because there was back then in 2007, there was both. So you had some places that would make you sign an exclusive agreement that you would only work with them. And then you had some places that required you to buy like a book and give them a fee. And then you had other outfits that would just basically take you in, and it was kind of like a gentleman's agreement where, okay, you're working with us for this amount of time. Don't work with any other headhunters, because if they were going to spend all the time and energy
Right.
on you, they wanted to be the ones that were going to place you somewhere. And actually, I learned a lot, man. I went to two of those events over the span of like my entire career. I've gone to two of those events. The great thing about those things, though, is you can always go back. So you don't have to be a service member transitioning out of the military. You're always able to go back. And so, like down the road, I went to another one. I was completely out of the military, but because I was a veteran, um, they they agreed to work with me and help me find another job placement.
Okay.
So there's two different companies, and it was kind of interesting to actually sit across from someone, especially during the training itself. And man, they were brutal with me. Like when I went in there, when we were doing the training portion and we were talking about um, interviewing, they were asking me some really tough questions that I hadn't really considered for myself, and my answers were not strong enough. And I remember sitting across from a retired sergeant major, and he just told me straight up. He goes, "Look, man," he goes, "your grades in college were not stellar. You had a 3.0. You did not go to an academy. Your undergrad is in criminal justice, and you were basically combat, or you were service support logistics in the military." So he's like, you've got people here who are helicopter pilots. You got people here who had very technical jobs. You have people here who are academy graduates. That's your competition. He goes, so when you describe yourself, when these companies ask you like, why should we pick you?
Yeah.
You need to describe yourself for who you are, which who you are is you're a scrapper, you're a fighter. Your entire life, you were not born with a silver spoon in your mouth. Everything that you have, you earned on your own. And I thought, wow, man, that really describes who I am, because in reality, I had to join the National Guard. I had to join the military in order to go to college. And then further than that, I decided to, because I thought it would be an honor, I decided to get commissioned as an officer because I feel like it would make me proud. It would make my family proud. And nothing was ever given to me. So all through the process, that's kind of how I described myself. And it was a good experience, man, like going through the headhunters, because I actually got a chance to, like I said, sit across and get some really critical advice on how to find my next career. But
Right.
unfortunately, man, like, out of the 4 opportunities that were on the table, by the time it was all said and done, I just had the one. So it was either go unemployment or take that job. And that first job that I had, I was only there for like a year. So I think they say over 50% of veterans that transition out, over 50% only spend, after that first year, they end up quitting. And so I was part of that stat, and out of 7 officers, I think 6 of us left after that first year just because it wasn't a good fit. It was a good company. It was just, I think it wasn't really what a lot of us were looking for.
Okay, so KP, that kind of leads to my next question is, so you were there for only a year. What was next for you? Did you have another opportunity that was lined up, or like did you have to move and go to another place to find that next opportunity?
Yeah, I was really fortunate because I had some friends that were also that had connections with other jobs. So I was able to find additional employment afterwards. And then over the years, like I finished up my MBA in project management. So I've been able to kind of jump around and find some good terms of employment. I actually worked for the government for a little bit, and that was a really good opportunity as well, because you actually sort of get that camaraderie again when you work for like the government, for example, like whether it be city, state, or federal, whatever. Because a lot of folks that were in there were also prior military as well. Um, when I worked for Rolls Royce, there was just the 7 of us that got hired in at the same time, all military officers, and then that was it. Like everyone else was either Notre Dame graduates, Purdue graduates, Indiana University graduates, and so they had their own little culture in themselves. So I was very fortunate afterwards because I did find employment where I was able to gain some of the camaraderie that I had when I was in the military, and I had employers that really understood the military culture.
How was we mentioned after you got out, you got that job in Indiana, but how was your overall transition out of the military? And how did that how did you end up where you are today?
So my overall transition out of the military was it was rather rough, but I felt like back in 2007, we didn't have the internet that we have today. And I've said this a number of times. In 2007, the sexiest thing on the internet was MySpace.
Yeah.
And now we still have MySpace. MySpace. I always describe MySpace as being kind of like that drunk uncle that lives at the end of the lake there. Like, he's still there. He's doing okay, but every now and then you got to check in on him. My MySpace was kind of the beginning of it all. Now we have LinkedIn, we have Facebook, we have all these different ways to connect with folks. So I would say this though, the one thing that hasn't changed about career transition is people getting in their own way. And I really feel like I got in my own way because I was offered opportunities to get help. I was offered, while I was at Schofield Barracks, I was offered to sit in front of folks who could critique my overall skills when it came to interviewing, when it came to writing out my resume. And I decided not to do it because I felt like I was smarter than that and I could just do it on my own. And I decided to go at it on my own. And I really wish I could go back and accept like all the help that was offered to me right there on base. But I find today that many times when I, start digging into folks' resumes or how much they really know about the interview process, how much they really understand like culture, because culture is really important. That I think is overlooked a lot of times.
Definitely.
If you're going to a company that, you know, um, has a certain type of culture, and that's not something that really resonates with you, you need to know that beforehand, before going in there. And I was talking to I was talking to a friend of mine, and I was explaining, how I was describing myself to a lot of these recruiters. I was like, yeah, I was describing myself as a fighter, someone who would get in there and get dirty. And then they brought up a very good point. They were like, well, did you even look at the culture of the company? Like, maybe that didn't speak well to what you were applying for.
Yeah.
I didn't think about that, but maybe I didn't rub people the right way, or maybe I came across as someone that they couldn't see themselves working with because I was so rugged and rough. um and I would say that overall, that my transition was tougher than it should have been. I really wish I would have taken my time and not been fearful of unemployment, because once you get paid, I was getting paid as an O3. The thought of getting paid $0, and the thought of like going in unemployment was scary to me. But looking back, man, I mean, I could have probably taken some time and just moved home for a little bit, and taken a deep breath and found the right fit for me. And I didn't do that. I just took whatever the hell I could take, and then I end up, quitting that job after the first year. So I would say that it was rough, but it was, a lot of it was on my own terms. I kind of created that myself.
So so after that, like, h- where did the idea? I want to talk about the podcast a little bit. Where did the idea of the Morning Formation podcast come about? Uh, how did that come about of you creating the podcast?
So that's a great question. So the podcast itself has been something that I've wanted to do for a number of years. Early on, after I got out, I still managed to sort of mentor and provide advice for some of the folks that worked for me while I was in uniform. The podcast and the YouTube that I just set up not too long ago, um, it's born from the concept of the pain points that I dealt with when I myself did my own career transition. And just because I'm not wearing the uniform anymore doesn't mean that I don't still that I still can't serve. Um, so to me, I people have different levels of support. People have different levels of being part of the solution.
Right.
And I'll give you an example. Like recently I was talking to a buddy of mine, and he was talking about how there was a local sheriff's deputy that was killed, and he happened to be a Marine. And so this guy went to his GoFundMe page. He dropped $50 for the family. In my opinion, honestly, that helps. But what really helps our military community is when you do things like what I'm doing, like where you create a podcast where you're providing information that's valuable to our community. It can help someone level themselves up. It can help themselves, get a better career situation than they would without it being there. So I want to provide long-term lifetime help, not just a quick, like, here's $50 and then I'm going to go to sleep like a baby tonight.
Yeah.
It kind of all boils down to, we always talk about, 22 a day, right? And I personally feel like some of that is part of the transition process. If you're able to get the ideal job in your ideal location, the ideal position, ideal salary, the whole 9 yards, I think that helps a little bit when it comes to piloting that transition from going from the uniform to civilian wardrobe. And if whatever I can do to try to help our community avoid some of the pitfalls that I did, because I ended up getting divorced after after I got out of the military, and that was really rough. That was a really low point in my life. Everything from broken relationships to broken goals, all that stuff that we deal with when we get out. I really thought, Raiden, that when I got out, I thought that being an Army captain, uh, having been in combat, I thought graduate's degree, I thought all that stuff was basically going to set me up. Like I didn't have to do anything. I could just show up and like I would get offered jobs. And that
Yeah.
just wasn't the case, man. Like it was tougher than that. Like I was competing with kids that went to Notre Dame and were part of like prestigious fraternities. You know what I mean? And I was like a little bit irritated by that because I'm like thinking to myself, I served my country. Like I went to war. Is that not enough for you? Or should I have gone to Indiana University and been part of this fraternity and done, keg stands, whatever they do over there? Like it was just frustrating to me, man. Like,
Yeah.
that's really why I started the podcast.
Yeah. I think, I mean, to your point, right? Like monetary, all that's great, providing that for family members or whatnot. But I think, with what you're doing with the podcasts and the information that you're putting out, it's out there for
Yeah,
however long you want to put it out there, right? For
right,
it's there for everybody to, they can pick and choose what episode, who they want to listen to, whoever guest you bring on, right? Like all the information is out there, and it's available and it's free. And
right.
there's that saying, a smart man learns from his mistakes, a wise man learns from other people's mistakes. And I think what you're trying to do, from what you said, is just basically have people learn from your experience, and the things that you went through during your transition.
Yeah, and I also want to add too, like I just joined Act Now Education. I've been a team member of Act Now Education for a while now, and I just joined the board. Act Now Education is an organization that's founded and ran by veterans, and we help bridge the gap between uh, opportunities that are for our military community and the actual military community themselves. Because a lot of times these opportunities are available, but they're just not marketed, and people just don't know about them. Like I talk to folks all the time, military veterans, and they're like, "Oh, we didn't know anything about DOL coach, project management. We didn't know anything about Scrum. We didn't know anything about all these certifications through Coursera." Like, and that's the gap that I want to fill and try to convince people, hey, invest in yourself. Go back, get your education, get the certifications. That way, when you come out and you have to compete against those guys that went to those prestigious colleges and were part of those fraternities and sororities, like you can actually compete and you can speak their language as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
KP, I'm a podcaster. Obviously, we have a podcast. What, when did you start podcasting, and what would you say has been kind of like the obstacles that you had to overcome during podcasting?
That's a great question, man. Well, I don't know about you, but for me, the obstacles that I overcame with podcasting was the one thing that I want everyone to understand that is that anyone can go to Best Buy and purchase one of these microphones. All right. You can buy any type of level of quality out there, but nothing beats the experience. So for me, it was the technical side of things that really to this day still is something that I'm growing to learn, but also to finding my way and finding my tribe, finding my circle, finding my network.
Mm.
So I've met great people like yourself, Ryan from Vet with a Mic, Jay Salters from Act No Education, the guys from V2I. That's another organization that helps veterans and
Vet to industry, is that correct?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, best industry. I was on Clubhouse, and there's so many great people that I was able to connect with. I used to run a room on Clubhouse on Friday nights, and it was called the Military Mix Up, and we had different topics that we would talk about, and had so much dialogue going on in there, man, and so much engagement in there. Um, so I don't know. It's like a close first and second, man. When it came to the technical side of things, was number one toughest for me, and then number two was trying to find my own light, trying to figure out like what is my style, who am I, how does this thing work. Yeah, I would say those two things are probably the toughest toughest parts of starting out with podcasting anyways, because it's not easy to sit behind this mic, man, and listen to yourself, you know.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, man. Like it's finding your community or your tribe, right? Like um that's definitely one of the hardest, when I mean, even now for me as well, just who is that I'm trying to speak to, or have people listen to my podcast to. um it's still a struggle, but I think, I mean, to your point, the key thing is just, if it's something that you're passionate about doing, um just start it, and you know go with the go with the journey, like go experience it. And if it's something that you later on don't want to do, then at least you can look back and be like, at least I
Yeah.
tried.
You really got to look in the mirror and ask yourself if this is something you want to do.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about you, man, but I've spent a lot of nights late having to get up the next morning for work or doing something, and and working on editing, working on something, and it's just like, and you live in a world, I don't know how it is for you, but for me, a lot of people don't understand it. Like, guys are throwing back beers, or they're doing this or doing that, and they're like, "Hey, where you at?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
"I'm editing, doing nerd stuff." And they're like, "Whoa, get over here, what are you doing?" It's like, "Oh no, man, like this is bigger than me. Like, this is important, and I want to really make a difference. So when the rubber meets the road, man, you got to look in the mirror and ask yourself, like, are you serious about this?" And I don't know if you've had that experience, but I have. And I think it's been over a year for me. I started last February. So this just right in the mid-month is going to be a year.
Yeah.
And just to get things cracking, though, my first 3 episodes was with my dad.
Okay.
And I did that because over the years I've lost so many family members. I had a great uncle that served in World War II, and I remember when I was a teenager, he'd sit at the table there in his kitchen. He would just talk about World War II. And teenager, I didn't really care all that much, right? He unfortunately passed away right after I went to my basic training, and I was never able to hear those stories or appreciate them. And so with my dad, he's 72 now, and I was able to sit down with him and have 3 good episodes for him to talk about his entire military career that I'll always have.
Yeah.
So, and it was easy for me to break the ice with him.
And
Just to
that's
get things started.
that's be something great to look back on, like,
Yeah.
just it'll be there for life, right? Like that, those
Well,
conversations.
what's amazing, man, is early on, that whole 3-part series was me talking about his journey, his transition into the military, transition during the military, and then transition out of the military. And back then, I wasn't 100% sure that that's what I wanted to do. But it's kind of funny because I look back at that, and that those 3 episodes was exactly what I'm doing right now, which I talk about career transition um, for our military community.
Yeah.
Trying to ease the pain points of that. So yeah.
So KP, what would you say has been like the most rewarding experience you had since you started podcasting?
I would say the most rewarding experience that I hear over and over again is the feedback that I get from people who say, "Oh, I didn't know anything about that," or "I hadn't heard of that before," or, "Thank you for that information," or "There was something that this person said during your podcast that kind of spoke to me and I could identify with." I would say that that's probably the most rewarding, um, not single event, but the most rewarding events that I hear over and over again is when we're able to connect with people. I live in Los Angeles, and you would think that, well, we have like 30 million people here, something like that. We have a lot of people here,
Yeah.
and you would think that living in a city like this, connecting with folks with like experiences, especially with the military, would be easy, and it's not easy. Just in my community, in my neighborhood, I only know of a couple of military veterans physically around me that I personally know. And I don't really know anyone unless I go to work or something like that. I don't really know anyone who served in Iraqi freedom or served in Afghanistan. So you would think living in such a large area with, so populated that you would be able to, and I still feel alone. But
Yeah.
But when I'm talking to folks like you and I'm able to get on here and talk to, like, Ryan and some of the folks from Act No Education, man, I really feel at home. Like, I really feel like, yeah, these guys get me, you know?
Yeah, because you're back in that brotherhood, the camaraderie, the community that you're a part of so long ago. So
Exactly. Exactly. And so it's great whenever I have an episode and someone gives me that feedback, like, "Oh, such and such said this, and it kind of got a lump in my throat, kind of got me thinking about
Yeah.
this, or got me, yeah.
KP, what's if somebody is out there um wanting to start a podcast, or maybe they've started a podcast and they're still trying to find their voice or their community, what actionable step would you provide for them right now?
The best thing to do, the number one thing that you got to do, is to get on LinkedIn, get on Instagram, get on Facebook, get on use Veterati. Veterati
Yes, that's a
is,
great one too.
yeah, and just, I just linked up with someone last week who's starting out an organization to help veterans within their region to find employment, and to also find I want to say it's kind of like a Yelp for veterans in certain states of certain regions. So they got with me last week, and they wanted to do a podcast. And when I started digging into their website, it looked like they were brand new. And so I was thinking, you don't have a whole lot here. How about you consider getting on Veterati, talk to this person, talk to that person. And today I just got feedback from them saying, "Oh, I spoke to these three people that you recommended to me, and I'm on the right track now. I understand where I'm going. They told me critically what I needed to do. I feel 1,000 times better than I did 2 weeks ago." So I would say the number one thing that you got to do is find a good mentor, find someone who you can bounce your ideas off of and get some good advice from. And Veterati is a great place to go for that.
Yeah.
And that's where that's the direction I told them to go, as well as I linked them up with several other people too to help them out with their journey. So make sure that you connect with folks, make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons, and you're being authentic about it, because the military community is a hard community to crack. If you're faking the funk and you're not there for the right reasons, you're going to wash out. Because as it stands now, as a veteran, I'm very conscious about who I connect with. I always feel like you go off base and you go to that used car lot, and they're trying to sell you that lemon because they know how much money you make. Veterans are very guarded in
Yeah.
that manner, man. Like,
Very
it's not,
protective. Yeah.
yeah, very protective, so um you have to come authentic, and you have to come across as, having a clear mission, a clear voice, and people have to trust you, and being part of a circle and connecting with folks is really important. So make sure you start connecting with folks on LinkedIn, and make sure you're authentic about it.
Yeah, LinkedIn. I think not too many people know about Veterati. That's just a great. I'm glad you mentioned that. That's a great resource for veterans to go to.
Yeah.
All right, so KP, one final question before we go to the second segment of the podcast. What's one thing you want our listeners and our viewers to take away from this episode?
I would say the number one thing that I want you to take away from this episode specifically is that understand that many times you can get in your own way when it comes to your career transition. Don't ever think that your resume or your interviewing skills are good enough, because at the end of the day, I'm here to tell you that it's when you get out of the military, it can be, worst case scenario, a very dog eat dog world, where you are going to be competing with folks that never served in the military. You might go to a company that, yeah, we want to hire military veterans, but we don't understand the culture of veterans. So the day that you go interview, you may be sitting across from a recruiter that never served before. If you go get those project management certifications, you go get Scrum, you go get the certifications that speak civilian, and you take what you did in the military, like DOL Coach, for example, is a really good example. That's an organization that was created by veterans, created by a veteran. But what they do is they take your resume from the military and they lay their project management template over top of that. They do like an hour interview where they talk about what are the things that you did in the military and how does it apply to project management. And they help you translate those skills from what you did in the military to civilian talk, project management. So I would say the number one thing you take away from this episode, man, is to definitely utilize, maximize all the resources that you possibly can. Connect with folks out there who can help you level up, folks that are looking to reach back and help the community out. You know, and that's it. You know, try to make your process less seamless and help our community, you know, get better with each generation that goes by.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the most important thing is to just ask, to just reach out. I think like what you said, we kind of get in our own way.
Mhm.
um with that, it was like we're too prideful, or we
Yeah.
we think we got everything under control because we spent so many years in the military and have done so many things that they're just, it's way different. And I mean, I'm still active duty, but I know for sure it's going into, once I leave, it's a new environment. And I'm going to reach out to people like you, right? Like people who are have transitioned, and just learn as much as I can, and hopefully um, go on from there.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're definitely doing the right thing and you're in the right space to kind of hear the stories and, you know, avoid some of those pitfalls that that many of us have fallen into. Fortunately, today you've got the internet and things are way more easier than they were
Yeah,
to connect
definitely.
with people. So, yeah.
All right, KP. So this going into the second segment of the podcast, it's called the Fast Five. Same five questions asked all my guests. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, brother. What's first question? What's one hobby you enjoy?
The one hobby that I enjoy the most is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Okay. How long have you been doing that?
I did that for 11 years. Since the pandemic hit, it slowed down quite a bit, but I get to train every so often. So I'm a three-stripe purple belt right now.
Nice, nice, man.
Yeah, I unfortunately had moved around so much that I went from gym to gym, so I wasn't able to progress. A lot of the guys I started with as white belts, they're now black belts. So for me, it was kind of rough moving around and jumping around to different gyms. There was no real continuity there. But for me, man, I just love it. I'm not looking to, I mean, I hate to say it, but I'm not looking for belts or anything like that. I'm just looking for the experience, and I enjoy doing it. So.
Awesome. Next question. If you had to choose one person to hang out with for one day, who would it be and why?
You know what's interesting is I watched one of your other podcasts and this question here was really really special to me, and I've thought about this beforehand. So the one person that I would spend a day with would be my dad. My dad. I would spend a day with him, even though I mean he's still around. But I don't think, you know, I in my mind I know that someday he's not going to be here anymore. But
Hmm.
throughout my whole life, he's been the number one person that has stood next to me my entire life and taken care of me. We've had some rough patches here and there, but at the end of the day, you know, he was my hero growing up. He was a crazy ranger out there on East Range, where I pretty much grew up out there in Wahiawa, Hawaii. And he took me fishing, took me everywhere when I was a kid, and you know, I can't spend enough days with him before, you know, before it's too late. So he would be the one person I would spend a day with.
And he's still in Hawaii?
No, he actually lives in Ohio now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, KP, next question. Recommend a book for our audience to read.
Oh boy. So lately I've purchased a lot of books, and I'm trying to dig into them one by one. I'm not a real big book reader. I would honestly say, man, the number one book that I would suggest for folks, and yeah, you know, it's still something that's going on today with terrorism, is there's a book called A Thousand Years for Revenge, and
Thousand Years for Revenge.
it's written by Peter Lance. It's a really really great book because folks my age, and I'm 41 now, we were kind of born and brought up through the years of the first World Trade Center bombing. The first World Trade Center bombing involved the U-Haul truck in the parking garage underneath. And we didn't quite understand like how that came about, and didn't understand a lot of that until September 11th happened years later. Then we started focusing more on like the Taliban and focusing on, you know, the whole terrorism plot. The thing I like about that book is that it takes you back to the 1980s all the way through September 11th and explains to you the chain of events that led up to that and into the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq. So I think it does a really good chronological job of explaining how things kind of festered into what happened on September 11th.
Okay. And then you said the book was 1,000 Years for Revenge
By
by
Peter Lance. Yep.
Peter Lance. Okay. KP, next question. What's your favorite quote and why?
Oh man, actually, I remember you asking this one too. My favorite quote. I think my favorite quote is, whenever we would, when I was in the military, specifically when I was in ROTC, and I know it sounds kind of dumb, but we used to get up like 3 days a week. We were full-time college students, right? Get up 3 days a week, do PT at like 6 a.m. in the morning. We're trying to live a college life. We're full-time college students, part-time job. At time I was drilling National Guard and I was doing this ROTC crap. So I was juggling all this shit like while I was in college, right? And there'd be some mornings that like some of the younger cadets would not feel like doing it or whatever. So I'd have to try to find ways to motivate them. And one of the ways was I would just try to say these short little things like, hey, nobody's working harder than you today. And things like that. And so I would say that that's the number one thing that I kept repeating. And I tell people all the time that, but now that I'm saying this, I think from a standpoint of mental health and a standpoint of beyond just motivating folks,
Yeah.
is my favorite quote is, and I don't know who said this, but the simple quote of "This too shall pass." Whenever you're going through a rough patch in your life, you tell yourself, this too shall pass. I mean, think about all the times when you've gone through a rough patch in life and it passes and you move on and great things happen and now you're down in a low part of your life. So you have to remind yourself sometimes that this too shall pass. So I'd like to say maybe there's two things. No one's working harder than you today. This too shall pass.
Yeah, that's a great message, man. Especially what you just mentioned with the mental health issues nowadays. It's just,
Oh yeah.
a good reminder. It's just this too shall pass.
Yep.
KP, last question. Where do you see yourself in a year, 5 years, or even 10 years from now?
In a year from now, I hope that I continue to grow the podcast to where I can increase the listeners that I have. I hope to have more sponsorships, more affiliates, in going into 2023. 5 years from now, man, I really would like to turn this into a nonprofit business, and start offering merch just like you and Ryan are doing. I'm a little behind on that, so it's kind of hard when you're a one-man show, man, to get all these different things together. So yeah, in the next 5 to 10 years, eventually I would like to just do this full time. In 10 years, hopefully I can do this full time and just help other people create podcasts as well. I think that over the span of this last year, I've learned so much. I've been writing down all the things that I've learned. So I plan on making a video of the top, 5 to 10 things that I've learned as a new podcaster, hopefully to help other people avoid some of those pitfalls that I had to deal with. Because I spent a lot of money, spent a lot of time on things that could have been avoided, if I had more guidance. And so hopefully I can help someone else out.
Well, I mean, KP, I was just listening to one of your podcasts earlier, and the information you're putting out there is definitely helping our community, especially the veterans who are benefiting from it. The people that you bring in, the value that they're providing, and I just wanted to say thank you for for putting those information out there for maybe the people, the veterans that might not know about it, right? You're kind of like that bridge that kind of helps helps them find those information, and appreciate you for that, man.
No, thank you for having me on the show, man. I really appreciate you, and hopefully, we can enhance people's lives and change people's lives. And that's, I think that's why you're here, and that's why I'm here, is to help out our own community. Because as time goes on, the population continues to grow, but there's very few of us that ever serve in the military. And
Yeah.
I think once you get out, you'll understand what I'm talking about if you don't already. But man, like sometimes, when they say 5% to 8% ever serve, I mean, that's really true. It's when you get out into the workforce, you'll see a lot of civilians out here and that will not be able to understand what you're talking about. So I think that if you can, you know, like I say, tune in and uh, stay tuned, stay focused, and stay motivated. That's the main punchline for my podcast, man, is to, stay tuned and connect with folks, just like you and just like me, you know.
Awesome, brother. So, one final thing: where can our audience find your podcast? Where can they connect with you? Where can they support you?
Yeah, so you can go to www.themorningformation.com. I'm also on Instagram, the underscore morning underscore formation underscore podcast on Instagram. You can connect with me on LinkedIn as well. But if you go to my website, you'll see all of the links for all the different social media platforms on there. So that's themorningformation.com.
All right, everyone, make sure you go to themorningformation.com. Go follow and support KP and his podcast, The Morning Formation Podcast. And just stay tuned and listen in to all the value that he's providing for our community. KP, brother, good talking to you, man. And hopefully I'll hear from you soon.
All right, man. Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it, Raiden.
All right, brother. Take care.
All right, you too, man.